I am mad fucking late. Mad late. Mad late. What's up? What's up? What's up? I am mad late. I said I was going to be at 3 o'clock. I am not on time. Not on time. I was debating whether or not I was going to even go live today, but it had been about 3 weeks. So it's time. It was time to get in here and get on live and start shooting the shit again because it had been a while. It had been a while. So we're gonna give it a minute, let people come on in. Welcome everybody. You know me. My name is Countryboi. I am from One My Black History podcast. If you'd like to introduce yourself, you know, we can talk, discuss, shout out where you from very early, and then we'll get into the main card. Get into the main card today. Um, but yeah, I don't have a whole lot of agenda. The plan was to run through what we talked about um, in my Sears catalog episode and how that ties into the episode that's dropping tomorrow, and then we're going to do this week in Black History because several things happened this week, and then we're going to talk. We're going to shoot the shit for a little bit, and hopefully that gets us to an hour. We'll see where we are. We'll see where we are uh, in an hour. If you are on Substack, I can't see your comments, which is unfortunate. Which is unfortunate. Um, but I can't connect to it, so that's a bonus. That is a bonus. All right, we get to 3 minutes, and then we'll get it popping. Yeah, I like that. I thought the Sears episode was interesting. That was relatively new to me. I had not wasn't aware of that. The episode prior to someone letting me know. And I got several emails about it. It's funny because I got several emails about it. People mentioning that, hey, I like the episode. You should do something on Julius Rosenwald, which, by the way, did I butcher his name or what? Did I not butcher his name really, really badly? Hey, it'd be like that sometimes. It'd be like that. Anyway, we're gonna get it cracking. So the setup for today is that we are going to do a high level summary of the Sears episode that I just talked about, and then I'm going to tie that into the episode tomorrow, which is about the postal service. Ironically, my dad worked for the postal service. Ours is crazy. And then we're going to do This Week in Black History, which is the death of W.E.B. Du Bois, the death of Emmett Till, and the March on Washington. So all those things happened this week in August, and then we'll see what we get from there. See who we are from there. What we got? What we got here? So the title of my episode was "How Sears Outsmarted Jim Crow," and while outsmarted, outsmarted was probably playing it up a little bit. There was no real um, intention on their part. They were just here to make money and saw an avenue with their mail order catalog that allowed them to be able to connect themselves to people in rural areas. But with Jim Crow, shopping for Black people it wasn't equal. Prices were set. You would go to the counter store or the the sharecropping store, and the prices were set by them. They also controlled the credit. They also controlled basically basically your dignity. If you went in there, you might have to wait behind until every single white customer was served. You may not be able to try on the goods or the clothing, and you might be steered towards inferior goods. Black customers were constantly made to wait, overcharged, and addressed without proper titles or respect. On top of that, you had things like the crop lien system, which they had to buy, which allowed them to buy things on credit that they paid off. Well, okay, back up. In a sharecropping environment, the crop lien system was basically you taking a lien against the crop that you were going to deliver to them at the end of the year. So they would set the terms that would say, I'm gonna give you X amount of dollars, $100 for $200 worth of crops. All right. This is how this worked. You pay it off. You were paid off in crops, but this is also how you continually stayed in debt, because you were constantly taking out loans and money, and the money that you were getting paid was never enough to get you out of this system of this cycle of debt. This is why they used to call sharecropping slavery by another name, because it's exactly what it was. It was a perpetuation of debt servitude that kept you constantly in indebted to them. So in 1872, something changed. It was called Montgomery Ward. And while the story wasn't primarily about Montgomery Ward, they were the first mail order catalog to set the stage on fire. And that was followed up with Sears and Roebuck, and I want to say it was around 1890. It was right 1890s, 1895, 1898 to 95. But they really, really supercharged it. All right. They sent you a mail order catalog with one national price. It was printed in black and white. You didn't have to talk to a clerk. There was no special pricing. There was no humiliation. Stuff just showed up to your doorstep. What happened is the timing was perfect, because right around that time, the Postal Service set up rural free delivery. Before that, you had anything over 4 pounds had to be handled by a private service, and that private service charged rural customers the most. All right. So now you're getting your stuff sent through the Postal Service and with rural free delivery, and the parcel post, which was the packages, the designated the packages. I'm sure my dad is like, dude, nigga, you're not right. But whatever. It's the packages that you sent. It's the type of package it was. It was called a parcel post. That happened in 1913. All right. All these things came in succession. Mail order catalog, rural free delivery, the postal post. Suddenly, people in remote farms could receive packages. And while the story was primarily about Black families, every rural customer had their life change, because now you were getting goods that weren't available to you at the corner store. I could buy the same stove they were getting in the city. I could buy the same dress, the same hat, the same rifle that the people in the city were getting from Sears. I was not beholden to the corner store. And while the story was primarily about Black people and how they were getting overcharged and how they would be treated poorly, the corner store had a monopoly on the entire town, because they were the only ball game in town, and they were overcharging everybody. And so Sears Montgomery Ward changed the lives of everybody. And when rural free delivery and the parcel post became standard, their sales went up fivefold. Sales went up fivefold. It completely changed their life. So, like, let's say you were trying to set up a business, or you wanted to be able to save money and mend your own clothes. You could purchase a sewing machine or a bed, or even a fucking house. They sold houses. They sold housing kits that would allow you to put together your own house. Matter of fact, There is a Sears home here in Charlotte, and the nerd in me wants to ride by. I keep forgetting because it's near downtown. I keep forgetting to go. Yeah, between 1908 and 1942, Sears shipped between they call them modern home kits. It was sent them by rail, and uh, you would put together a kit, a house in a box. It's a house in a box, and for families who were blocked, specifically, but once again, black people who were blocked by local retailers and builders, this at least allowed you to get the materials. You still had to deal with get financing. You still had to purchase the land, but at least you weren't blocked from purchasing the materials. All right. Another big thing was the ability to be able to purchase firearms. In many places, especially during Jim Crow, it was illegal to sell firearms. And if it wasn't a law against it, Jim Crow etiquette, which was basically like the customs that everybody understood, but they weren't written down. Specific example, Jim Crow etiquette means that you don't shake the hand of a white woman. If a white couple is walking on the side of the street, you cross the street. If you're in a restaurant, a mixed restaurant, one of the rare ones, you allow them to eat first. You allow white folks to eat first. All of this is Jim Crow etiquette, and it is understood. And the punishments for breaking Jim Crow etiquette could be just as bad as you breaking the law, maybe worse. You know, people have been lynched. People have been lynched for much, much worse. So there's a lot of places where they wouldn't sell you a firearm. Montgomery Ward and the Sears catalog, you could purchase a firearm. You could purchase a firearm for your own protection. Ida B. Wells argued that a rifle at home, what did she say? Argued that when the law won't protect you, a rifle at home might. I mean, that's everything. That's facts. It's facts. When you live in a world where everybody's watching against you, you need to be able to protect your family, and this allowed you to do that by being able to purchase a rifle from Sears, the Sears catalog, and Montgomery Ward. Now, while Montgomery Ward didn't really do this, Sears would also allow you to purchase things in installments, which was a brand new thing. So basically, you could get credit from them and purchase things in installments. So that really, really, really hurt the local store. They had to get a line. It really, really cracked the monopoly, because now not only was I getting credit, but they had a national price. You pay on time. It's shipped to your town. Local business owners were furious. So what they would do is they would have catalog burnings. They would come and get together and burn Sears and Montgomery Ward catalogs. And some storekeepers were also the postmasters in the local town, and they blocked money orders or delayed packages. What Sears did to respond to this was, inside the catalogs, they printed step-by-step instructions to how to avoid the local postmaster. If they want help, you can hand your order directly to your mail carrier. Here's how to do that. They were well aware that they were being blocked by local by the local shopkeepers in that town, and it was showing people in rural America how to get around it. In additional to that, even if your handwriting was horrible, and a lot of people in these rural counties, they, maybe had low education or not much at all, they said they would still take it. If they could understand it, they could figure out what you were trying to say, they would still take your packages and your money. It got so bad that they started rumors that the owners of Montgomery Ward and Sears were black, because they did so white people wouldn't shop with them. And there is some irony, because I do remember hearing a rumor recently that Alvin Sears was black. I think they showed a picture of him and was making the argument. And it's funny to see that those same rumors come full circle, or make their way all the way back around. What the world? Anyway, Um, Now, the funny thing about this Sears catalog thing, because my dad talks about this, and I think he's in here. He talks about how the end of segregation was never about people doing right, about doing the right thing, the thing that was appropriate, or correcting your wrongs and ills. It was always about money. And that's the crux of this story. This story is basically talking about how Sears didn't care about whether you were black or white. They just wanted you to have green. And that's how you make the most money. That's how you maximize your money. You know, my dad would mention about, the end of segregation and how that aligned with around the time that you see an explosion of franchises. It's not, if you're a McDonald's franchise, you want the ability to be able to sell the same hamburger to the same people, whether you're in Chicago or Clarksdale, Mississippi. And that's exactly what this is. This is this is a changing of the guard, a changing of thinking that there's local shopkeepers who were discriminating on people and keeping themselves with a limited mindset when capitalism and big business we hear about that green. We hear about getting paid. We're here about getting paid. And ironically about Sears had their own discrimination cases. While it wasn't about how they treated their customers, they did have some racial discrimination cases brought against them during the 1980s. And while all of them while most of them were settled out of court, that's not, I don't want to paint Sears as the savior, as a savior here. It's a story about people trying to make some money and inadvertently helping black people in the process. Matter of fact, if you think about it, that's a very capitalist. It's a very capitalist mindset. It's an American dream. um, and this kind of brings us into the story that I'm going to tell tomorrow, which is about the Postal Service. I mentioned that my pops worked for the Postal Service, but um, the catalog, the mail of the catalog, Montgomery Ward, Sears and Roebuck would have never worked without the Postal Service bringing the catalogs to your porch, without it bringing it here, with rural free delivery, bringing your packages, bringing you the catalog at all, and that same network that carried Sears newspapers was also a bit created power. Once again, during Jim Crow, many banks didn't allow black customers, but every town had a post office. Money orders were a great equalizer of that, and it would cash converted with a guaranteed instrument that you could mail this anywhere, and there was no bank account allowed, no shopkeeper running interference. So basically, what a money order allowed you to do is I could purchase things, send a money order in with the catalog, take it down here, purchase a money order, send that in, and have my goods at my doorstep. Or better yet, I could do COD. Better yet, I could purchase goods through COD. I could order something and when it showed up, cash and delivery, and I had a chance to lay my eyeballs on it. So anyway, how it worked is how money orders work. You would bring cash to the window and you bought a postal money order. You filled it out, you mailed it. On the other end, it was cashed into a check. If you were buying something from a catalog, this is how you got paid. This is how you paid for it, excuse me. This is how you were paid for it. If you were sending money to someone else in another area or a relative up north, this is how you move money safely. It's through the Postal Service. And all of this came with the federal guarantee. They even had, and this is something I did not know, because there was at one point a postal saving system, a postal bank from 1911 to 1966. They had a Postal Service savings bank that gave a place to deposit small sums of money with the United States government guaranteeing the funds. Immigrants and black communities would use it heavily, but also it exploded in popularity during the Great Depression. After the stock market crash and people made a run on banks, they moved their money to they moved their money to the postal savings. They moved their money to the postal savings. Um, but in addition to like rural free delivery and money orders and cash on delivery and the savings, the mail also moved information. So I think they created something called second class postage, which was basically like cheap postage that allowed them to be able to ship newspapers. The black press, it allowed the black newspapers to travel by mail bags. This allowed for the creation of the NAACP's The Crisis, the Chicago Defender, Jet Magazine, Ebony Magazine, the Pittsburgh Courier. None of these stories, and none of these images could have reached the nation without the train and postal service stitching that map together and allowing me to be able to cheaply send this information to black people. And lastly, the most important thing about the postal service in this story is that it was jobs. Like with the explosion of the postal service and the catalogs and rural free delivery and all the things that we talked about, they needed people to work it. They needed people to work those jobs, and a lot of those jobs were filled by black people. And it gave you a stable employment, and many of the people that worked for the post office became expected members of the community and community leaders. They were, the president of your local NAACP chapter. So, like, in the end, all of these things, like, they kind of they tied together. You could purchase goods and get things through Sears, but that mechanism that Sears used came through the post office. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow and much more in depth. Like I mentioned, Pops worked for the Postal Service. Matter of fact, his brother did too. It was a job for people. It was a good job, quality job. My dad was putting in crazy hours. I remember days, man. It was at least like 12 hours was like easy. He put together hours. He worked hours that, like, now that I'm adult, those are unfathomable. You were from 6 to 6. You got up at 6 this morning and you got home at 6 o'clock. And you did this 6 days in a row. Like, bro, where do they do that? Woo, built different. Anyway, we're gonna move on to this week of Black History. Things that happened in Black History. On God, what date was that? On August 27th of this week, 1963, W.E.B. Du Bois died in Ghana. He was 95. He's 95. He, in his final years, he applied for a citizenship in Ghana, and he was working on like the Encyclopedia Africana, which was like this global project of Black knowledge. At 95, he was working on this. Honestly, it was an ambitious project. Even if he wasn't 95, I don't know how he would have ever completed such an ambitious project. It seems like something that would have taken decades, taking decades to get through. And I think this might have been a global, a bit of his life's work, but I just don't know if it's something. It's so much information. How do you create that? How do you create an encyclopedia on Black people? Anyway, the interesting thing about Du Bois is he lived so long. He lived almost 100 years after being born in Massachusetts in the 1800s, that he was like 3 different people. He lived multiple different lives. At first, he felt like he could affect racism or change racism. He has this thing where I posted earlier this week where he saw a store selling the knuckles from a lynching in Atlanta of Sam Hose. And he knew that white folks would never change their mindset of about us, just appeasing to their character, appeasing to their empathy. He was like, I'm going to change their mind with data. And this led him into like the Philadelphia experiment, where he lived in an area in Philadelphia for like 2 years, and it's basically to explain the Negro problem. The Negro problem was like, hey, it's been 30 years since slavery. Why are black people doing so? Why y'all not? Why you haven't pulled yourself up by your bootstraps? He wanted to explain it. And so he built data and a study and lived with black folks for a time, interviewing people in this neighborhood and finding out why. And I mean, I don't have to tell you the answer for you to know exactly what the answer was. They were a product of this situation. But it's also led him to beef with Booker T. Washington. It's also led to the creation of the Niagara Movement, which is the predecessor to the NAACP, and then him becoming the editor of the Crisis for the NAACP. All that stuff happened, early in his life, with him going from, hey, I'm trying to appease to the empathy, to I'm going to go data driven, and then I work for the Crisis. And then about 1930s, 1940s, he was like, oh yeah, they suck. They can't change. They're never going to change. You guys, this is trash. This is around the time he started to embrace communism, which is ironically like the midpoint of, like, after the first Red Scare that happened in 1920s, moving into the second Red Scare, and then he's embracing communism, and they already were attempting to try to tie communism to black liberation. So they're like, that nigga right there, that's the one. He went and he especially was fond of China, because it was one of the few communist countries with at the time that wasn't white. He went and visited China and several other communist countries, and this led to him getting his passport taken away from him. And then after he got it back, he was like, peace, I'm out here, I'm out this piece. He left. He left and moved to Ghana with him and his wife, and never came back. It's like, I mean, he did a lot. He changed. He was very much the presenter to the modern civil rights movement. He changed that mindset and ushered in the new Negro movement, which was like, yo, we're not doing this no more. We're changing the way we do things. But then by the end of it, he was sick of it. By the time of the actual civil rights movement, because he died right before the March on Washington, like the day before, he was over it. He was over it. And so, like, the next day, on the 28th, was August 28th, 1963, was the March on Washington. And at that march, which was put together by the four big groups at the time, the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, NAACP, CORE, somebody else was in there. Anyway, they all put this thing together, but it was the brainchild of Bayard Rustin. The March on Washington was Bayard Rustin's baby. He had been planning that. He had been planning this idea for years, and he had a falling out because he was close friends with Martin Luther King, and actually ushered in Martin Luther King into nonviolence. Prior to that, Martin Luther King tried to get a concealed handgun permit. This is around the time of the Montgomery bus boycott, which was 1955. And he was trying to get his weapon for his protection, and he came through. And Rustin says he had a gang of guns, but King says he only had one. King says he only had one. Hey, to a pacifist, it maybe look like you got a lot of them. I don't know. But he was basically the one to put the idea in his head of being a pacifist, and basically got King on board with the idea that if you are going to run a nonviolent movement, you couldn't even carry a weapon for your own protection. I would argue against that. Hey, anyway, because Rustin was openly gay, he had a charge, a crimes against humanity charge on him. If you watch his story, I think it's on Netflix, called Rustin. He had the charges against humanity. something that basically getting caught having gay sex or allegedly caught having gay sex. After that came out, and he was openly gay at the time, but like this is a news story. His critics used that against him, and so when they were planning a march against the Kennedy administration, and I think it's the supposed civil rights bill during Robert Kennedy's first term, uh, they got Adam Clayton Powell to say that they were lovers. He was like, "Yo, I'm gonna tell people that were lovers that you guys are lovers if you don't shut this idea down." And then what ended up happening is that they distanced him. Like King was like, "Yo, chill, chill." Like, yeah, you know, you the homie, but you're too close. And they actually separated him from the movement for a while. And this brings us back to the March on Washington, because he was brought back into the fold for the March on Washington, but he could not be the planner. He had to be like secondary. And this is where Philip A. Randolph comes in, because Rustin and Randolph were homies, and Randolph is the planner, but this is Rustin's dream. This is Rustin's dream. He ran the logistics and the unions and the churches and all of the things they needed to make this work. Was Rustin. That was on his shoulders. He did that. And so at the march, everybody was waiting on something bad to happen, for people to fight and for riots, and that never happened. It went off without a hitch, except for John Lewis, because John Lewis, he was about to be real spicy. He had some plans. His original speech, and at the time he was the youngest person. He was the youngest person to speak at the march, and he was like just 23 at the time. And he was going to say something about Kennedy's civil rights bill basically being too late. It's too little, too late. It's basically a verbiage, and also saying that they're going to go Sherman scorched earth on Jim Crow was his, and the other guys, and they were older, wanted him to tone down his rhetoric, and was fully prepared to like back up and take him off the bill. But at the last minute, he changed his speech. He softened his speech to basically just say that we want freedom today. We want freedom now. And it was still powerful. But a part of me was like, yo, you should have said what you said. Stand on business. Stand on business. But I see why he didn't. I completely understand why he didn't. One of the other interesting parts about the March on Washington is that Martin Luther King, of course, he spoke last, and he had this speech written. It basically was like, he had this really nice speech written, and while he was talking and he giving his speech, Mahalia Jackson, who sang at the speech, told him, was like, "Tell him about the dream, Martin. Tell him about your dream," because he had told her about it. And he went off script, and so that 16-minute, because he was only supposed to speak, I think, for like 4, and he spoke for 16 minutes, and that I have a dream speech. That entire speech was just him. You could, and honestly, when you hear it, you can hear the preacher in him, because it felt like a sermon, a bit like a sermon, and it was awesome. So one of my favorite parts of the story is that he came with that straight up off the dome. And lastly, the same day, but not the same year. The same day, but not the same year as the March on Washington, Emmett Till was murdered in Money, Mississippi in 1955, which ironically was the same year as the Montgomery bus boycott. And it was rough. Like most of you know the story of Emmett Till. He was 14-year-old black boy who was accused of whistling at, winking at, touching a white woman, and her husband, who was not in Money, Mississippi on the time. He was fishing. When he heard about it, he got him and his brother-in-law together, J.W. Millam, and they kidnapped Emmett from his house and beat him beat him, shot him, and tied him to a some type of fan and dumped him in the Tallahatchie River. And there was no justice. There was no goodness in that story. Nothing positive came from the story. The only way they were even able to identify his body is because he was wearing his dad's ring. You know, his body had been floating in the Tallahatchie River for days. And when his Uncle Moses Wright, came to see him, like, he was wearing his father's ring. His dad was in World War II. He died during World War II. He was not a good person, by the way. Like, matter of fact, he's one of the reasons why he didn't get justice. But and the police came. They went and arrested her husband and J.W. Millam. They put him on trial. All-white jury found them not guilty. Afterwards, they talked to the all-white jury. Basically, and the jury basically stated that they thought that they were guilty. They were sure that they had killed Emmett Till, but they did not think that at the time in Mississippi, the charge of murder carried a minimum life sentence. The only other choice was death. And they did not think that life in prison was an appropriate punishment for the murder of a black man by a white man. Now, and that's their verbiage, not mine. I completely understand. He was a black boy. He was a baby. But that was their verbiage. They went on to do an interview in Look magazine in 1957, where they talked about the murders and detailed the murders and showed absolutely no remorse whatsoever. During that entire time, Mamie Till Mobley, who was his mother, continued to write letters to J. Edgar Hoover and I think Eisenhower at the time, and pleading her case. Eisenhower never wrote back. Hoover basically stated that justice had been served. This was the justice system working as it was intended. They did the Justice Department. Okay, so it's an interesting thing because murder is a state charge. Murders are brought by the state, but kidnapping is a federal charge. This happened after Lindenberg. After Lindenberg's child was kidnapped, they made that a federal offense. So they attempted to bring kidnapping charges against Roy Bryant, that's his name, Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam. And what ends up happening is, God, what is this senator? Senator Mississippi at the time, I can't remember his name. It don't matter. They brought together a grand jury, and the senator basically argued that because Emmett Till's father was killed, he wasn't killed. He was sentenced to death during World War II because he did something. I think he assaulted some women in France, or something he did in France ended up getting him a death sentence. And they basically tied Emmett to his father, saying that because his father did this in France, Emmett is most likely a child of that. See, I told you, they just like that. That's how they roll. You know, he did that, he guilty, and they declined to bring up charges. And that was the last time anybody, like, I think during the 2000s, they attempted to reinvestigate the case. But at the time, everybody who was heavily involved was already dead. Apparently, there was a third co-conspirator who entered the house other than Roy Bryant and J.W. Millam. But he was also dead. He was also dead. The white woman who, God, I cannot remember her name. Something Bryant. That lady, Carolyn Bryant, basically spoke to a biographer during the 2000s before her death, basically stating that whatever Emmett Till did in the store that day did not warrant what happened to him, and she pushed off all the blame onto her husband. And in her words, did not tell her husband about what happened at the store. He found out, he allegedly, from her, this is her words, he found out from people at the store. They told him that there was an incident that happened at the store several days prior. After he got back, he confronted his wife, allegedly beat her and beat the answer out of him, and then asked where they could find the boy that did the talking. That is when he got his brother, and then they went and at 3 o'clock in the morning and snatched up Emmett Till. I think she's full of shit, but you're entitled to your own story. In the end, there was no justice. Nobody got justice. It wasn't a happy story. Mamie Till Mobley fought most of her life to try to get justice, and nothing ever came of it. It's all bad. The only positive that you could take out of this is that it was one of the things that was the early catalyst for the very early civil rights movement, because that happened around August of 1955, and the Montgomery bus boycott was December of 1955. And Rosa Parks states that when she's sitting on the bus and they're asking her to move, and she thought about moving, and then she thought about Emmett Till and was like, "It's no way. It's no way that I could move," So, I like to think that he didn't die in vain, that it was some joy or something positive came from his death, rather than, unabashed Mississippi Delta white supremacy. Anyway, on to more positive things. I'm going to check the comments, see how everybody's doing. Let me know where you guys are from. Ask me any questions. I'll answer any questions you have for me. And yeah. Oh man. My wife's in here. Oh man, I did not know this. All the comments in here, just my dad, my wife. It's okay. This ran my mouth for 40 minutes. I don't need no help. But yeah, he spoke, and basically my dad basically said my granddad did too. So like my dad, his brother, my granddad all work for the Postal Service. That's what I'm saying. This is why this episode tomorrow it's not just it's a story and that connects to Black history, but it's also something that's very close to me, is important to me. I feel closely tied to this. This is something that is I think it's dope. I think you guys gonna enjoy it, and it's really close to me, because a lot of Black people, it employed a lot of Black folks. They employed a lot of Black folks, as well as helping you get your packages and not have to deal with ornery white folks in the process. You can get your packages, you can purchase what you want without having to go to the store, without having to deal with people who hated you on a regular basis. I did not know this. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is Pops giving me information that I had no idea. I had no idea. I was unaware of that he owned a post office. And that's probably a bit of the cheat code. Because like if your postmaster was Black. Like I could really, what's up, brother? What's up, brother? Also, I like to thank. I want to shout out everybody who watched the Sears episode. Is doing wonderful. It's doing really well. That episode was sent to me in an email. Somebody mentioned that to me. This is why, like, if you guys have ideas and stories that you want me to cover, I am more than welcome to take your ideas and try to fit them into my schedule and the brainchild of all these ideas I have in my head about where from Black history. I know Dave wanted me to do. Dave has this idea. He wants me to do like the Middle Passage, what it was like on the Middle Passage. I was like, bro, that's dark. It's dark. Like, bro, how am I even going to find information about that? I mean, I would love to do it. I just know I need to try to find a way to frame the Middle Passage in a way that is palatable for people because it's gonna be dark. It's my wife. The teacher. Anyway, I have run my mouth long enough. I like to thank everybody who's in here checking me out today, enjoying, even though you're not saying a whole lot. Just to recap, we talked about the Sears and Roebuck catalog, Montgomery Ward. This connects to the video that I had last week, how Black people were able to purchase goods and receive goods to their doorstep, bypassing local shopkeepers, and they were mad as hell. And how that ties into the episode tomorrow that comes out tomorrow about the Postal Service, because they were that network of people that the network that allowed you to be able to purchase things from the Montgomery catalog, to be able to buy things. So yeah, it's dope. It's very dope. Other than that, I like to thank everybody, all my day ones, all my subscribers, all you guys. You're amazing. You helped me to be able to put this together, to be able to do this. All your financial contributions are wonderful, are wonderful, and it allows me to be able to spend more time doing what I enjoy, which is telling stories and getting here on live and creating videos. I love it. I thank you all for your support, and yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all for coming out. God bless you. Good night.